what I want to do this year is in the cornfield, I want to incorporate a couple of drifts of some sunflowers, really mainly because the cornfield consists of the cornfield weeds of yesteryear. So we've got corn cockle, corn chamomile, corn flowers, corn poppies, corn marigold, but they have a relatively short season. And then as they go over, I thought, wouldn't it be nice to have a couple of drifts of sunflowers? And I'm also thinking about wildlife, of course. I was watching a flock of long-tailed tits yesterday in the garden. Oh, so pretty little things, that little sort of grey, pink balls of fluff. But all the finches just love the seeds of sunflowers.
Hello and welcome to episode 109 of Talking Dirty, over at East Ruston Old VIcarage, looking absolutely fabulous this sunny, springish day. We have Alan Edward Herbert Gray, our happy and very handsome horticulturalist.
And here I am sitting 60 miles away from her, and I'm looking at a grey sky. No sunshine here, but there's plenty of sunshine with her. So hello to Thordis Maria Sophia Fredrickson. How are you doing?
Oh, so sunny in Cambridgeshire. It's certainly not been that way. And when we're recording this, we're in a period of proper sort of showers and sun. And fortunately, I'm mostly outside in the sunny bits, and undercover in the rainy bits. But that's, I'm sure, set to change. This week, we are catching up with someone brand new to Talking Dirty, but someone who you probably follow on YouTube and on social media or read her books. Liz Zorab, welcome to the podcast of By the Farm with your, goodness knows, 120,000 subscribers or something?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, for people who don't know you, just give us a little potted history of your kind of relationship with plants, with homesteading, with gardening, with books, all of that stuff.
Oh, potted history. Well, I'm a woman of a certain age, and therefore I have been gardening for well over 40 years. I started off in ornamental gardening, very much so. And as time has gone on, I have explored more and more growing my own food. And for the last 7 years or so, I have been producing about 80 to 85% of all the food and drink that we consume at home.
Oh, what a sense of satisfaction.
Oh, yes.
That's absolutely brilliant.
Isn't it? And you're one of those people, reading your books, that has, the relationship with plants started with your family, with grandparents growing, and I'm not sure how integral that was to you catching the gardening bug, but that it's definitely left you with lots of memories and associations.
It's left me with masses of memories, but the culprit or my hero, depending on how you want to look at it, is Jeff Hamilton. He taught me to garden, not in person, via the telly, but he did a small snippet in a program about taking cuttings of asters, and the next day or the weekend afterwards, I think I had gone to the veg shop and there were some asters, so I bought them and tried it, and I took cuttings and they worked, and that was it. It was just like I was utterly smitten, and from that point onwards it was like me in the garden.
I also love your learning from books. I mean, obviously learning from Jeff Hamilton, but absorbing, sitting there in bed reading these books and wanting to try things, and maybe starting with the more RHS type books and then getting the personality of people like Christopher Lloyd really drawing you in.
Yes, and I still go to bed and very often fall asleep with gardening books all over the bed, and I wake up with one in my face and things. And it's just, I get so much joy from reading other people's words about their relationships with gardens. It's one of those things that I would say it's a guilty pleasure, but I don't even feel guilty about it.
Well, I mean, Alan, obviously you knew Christopher Lloyd. You're a huge fan of his work, and people like Beth Chatto. I mean, it goes on and on. All of these writers who, you're right, Liz, like it's their personal relationship, capturing that and being such good writers and knowing so much about the plants. It does imbue you with
what else it is. I think it's these people, when they give you the epiphany moment, like Liz's asters. You have it when you read somebody like Christopher Lloyd, The Well-Tempered Garden or The Adventurous Garden, or one of those. You have it because he shows you with words how to do it. And he also encourages you to experiment. And we had a thing a few years ago. I mean, this is just nonsense really, but we needed mauve sweet peas, and we had a problem with mice, and we were growing mauve sweet peas for somebody. They wanted them for a wedding, and it was, crucial. And we just didn't have enough. And so what we did is we took cuttings of the top shoots, and because they all shot again, and those cuttings all rooted. Now, I would never have done that had I not had Christopher Lloyd in the back of my mind saying, for goodness sake, don't be stupid, take a cutting.
Yeah, and actually experimenting, I think that's something that comes through when you talk about books. Your book, The Seasoned Gardener, which is out at mid-April, getting all that experience in there and having it, just experimenting, the joy you get from having a go at things and seeing if it works.
Yes, and I love that whole thing of let's just give it a go and see what happens. And I'm very happy to share, yes, that worked, and that really didn't work. And trying to find out why it didn't work, because I think I learn far more from stuff that doesn't work and from mistakes than I do from something that went right. And I kind of try and look at it rather than it went wrong, it was a mistake. I try and look at it, it's just one step and one more thing eliminated from the long list of potentials to get to where I want to be. And it's so easy to go, I failed. And it's much nicer to go, okay, well, that one didn't work, so don't need to try that one again. Let's try something else now. Yeah. And it gave me permission to do some really quite silly things in the garden and just enjoy every moment of it.
Oh, please tell us a silly thing that you've done in the garden.
Oh, I've done all sorts of experiments with what you can use for mulch. So I've done everything from cardigans to carpets, different types of animal bedding and molehills and all sorts of bits and pieces. And then can I use shredded paper? Yes, of course I can use shredded paper. Much better if you hold it down with something rather than let the wind blow it everywhere and then spend weeks picking up little bits of shredded paper. So it's that sort of stuff, and it's good fun. And some of it is just me not being terribly logical, and other bits is just purely I just want to experiment.
There are lots of lovely ideas in your book. Growing your winter pea shoots in a suspended gutter in the greenhouse or the polytunnel. I thought, what a great use of space. And I'm assuming, I know mice can get everywhere, but hopefully you lose fewer to mice by doing that.
I hope I lose fewer. So I'm doing at the moment, I've got sweet peas, I've got lupins. In fact, I've been out filming today, looking at how they're progressing, and they're all just raised up. So they're off surfaces. Hopefully they're far enough away. If mice or voles or anything can get to them, they've got to do a kind of a salt course first. And it's like, well, there's other things that they could get at before they get at my peas, my sweet peas, or the lupins. So hopefully they would go to the others first.
You just give me an idea, Liz, because I sowed both some garden pea seeds and some sweet pea seeds yesterday, and I've had I've had one crop of sweet pea seeds that the mice got at. They didn't get them all, but they got at them. And I've just suddenly had an epiphany moment. I'm going to hang them from the roof. Why not?
I just use baling twine.
I spent last night in a fitful sleep because I'd sown these pea seeds. They're a very tall eating pea, and I can't remember. It's somebody's mummy, and I don't mean mummy as in mother. I mean mummy as in bandaged body. And they are these seeds. We went to the local garden club's Seedy Sunday a couple of weeks ago, and they were there and being offered, and supposedly came from Tutankhamun's tomb. Well, God knows what else came from his tomb, so they might as well have done. I don't know. Let's just say they're a heritage variety of some form or another. And I only managed to get 10 seeds, and I thought if the mice get to them, they're gone. I walked out of the greenhouse just before joining you here this morning, and that fortunately they have not been marauded. But again, I'm going to lift them up. I'm just wondering, would it not be sensible if you've got a tray of sweet pea seeds to put them on 4 of those water bottles? You buy your water in a bottle, cut the top off so they're all level, and they're shiny plastic. Yeah. Mice won't scrabble up there, will they?
Who knows?
His brain's
they
going
seem
out.
to get everywhere. So when I suspend them, I try and suspend them in the center of the greenhouse.
Yeah.
So they're as far away from the edges as possible. So if mice are going to jump, they got to jump quite a long way. I just have visions now, like these flying mice.
They're called bats, darling.
I'm loving this. This is like some sort of Tom and Jerry episode. I can just imagine him like trying to get to the to the pea seeds. And you mentioned you've been out sort of filming the progress of these things. How did your YouTube channel come about?
So when we moved to our previous home, I started writing a blog, and I wrote that almost every day for about a year. And I just got to the point where what I was trying to explain was taking me 30 photographs and hours to write, just because what I was trying to explain was, it's not necessarily it was complex, it's my lack of good English or good grammar, or one of those, say my lack of words. And so I thought it'd be so much easier to film this. So I just did this kind of like very quick film, which I then added into my blog to kind of some of that. I didn't have to take all these photographs. And then after a while, I thought, you know what, actually, filming it's not that it's faster, because actually the editing process is so much slower than writing, but I could show much more complex ideas. And so that's what I started doing. I started making videos, and I've got to say, I didn't like being in them. I still don't like seeing me on camera. But it's just one of the things I learnt to do, because you can film with the camera facing away from you for a long time, but in the end, you've actually just got to get in front of the camera and go, I did this. And my husband, who does radio, gave me a little hint and a tip, and he said, don't talk to the people who are watching. Pick one person and talk to them. So I actually, all of my videos, I am showing either my mother or my father what I'm doing in the garden, and I just have a conversation with them. And they're no longer with us, so they can't criticize anything I'm doing. They can't do my dad's thing of like putting a dandelion out going, cool, look at this weed, as he shakes the seeds everywhere. So I can just go, you know, I like to leave the dandelions. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, yes, and he can't shake the seeds everywhere. So no, I just have this one-to-one conversation, which was why hopefully my videos feel like it's a one-to-one with you, because actually I am just having a one-to-one.
And that's basically what you've done with the book as well. You're just, it's a continuation of that style, and just sharing your gardening year, interestingly starting in autumn, and then sort of that beginning, that harvesting feeling, and then continuing from there.
There are so many books that are January to December, what to sow, takes you through that process. And I just thought, actually, my biggest pleasure is not in sowing and planting. My biggest pleasure is in harvesting and eating. So I'm going to just flip the book on its head and start with the point where there's the biggest amount of harvest coming in, which for me is autumn. And I'm going to do it from that point of view. So it does explain when to sow things, but most of all, it's a book about my relationship with the garden, with the environment. Hopefully it will provoke people into thinking about how they interact with their surroundings, and how much they enjoy them. I mean, it is a celebration. It's a book inviting people to get as much enjoyment as they can from their growing spaces.
Yeah, it's that thing of being, the impact that being in the garden has on you, I think.
Yeah.
And that it's back to personal relationships.
Yes, absolutely.
Which obviously, I mean, someone like you, Alan, I don't know if you've ever been to East Ruston Old VIcarage, seeing as you're in Wales. It is literally the opposite side of the country. But 32 acres, much of which, you can have so many different relationships with different parts of your garden, Alan. And I'm sure that your season ticket holders and your visitors have that almost as much as you do.
Yeah, but I think the thing is that my relationship with my garden is intensified by my concentration on the area in which I'm working. And if I'm working and changing and developing an area, I mean, I won't be there for 10 minutes. I'll be there for 3 days, 5 days, 7 days. And so therefore you are thinking about that. And so you have a relationship with it. And, there's the same way that I know 32 acres is a lot. But, I take the dogs on a ramble, and I take a notepad and pen with me, and I think, certain piece of garden, you suddenly look at it, the plants are in a different stage of their development or whatever, light's different and things like that, and you think, I know what would look wonderful here. Make a note of it, because by the time you get back, you'll have forgotten, because you'll have several other ideas, and it's only your last ideas that you remember clearly. So I do that. So I'm having a relationship with it pretty much all the time. But I do need to make notes. It's nothing to do with advancing years.
There are too many ideas up there.
Well, yeah, the head's not big enough. Don't ever say that.
So, Alan, I do the same thing as I'm walking around my not 32 acres. That's an amazing amount of space. And I don't take pencil and paper. I take my phone, and I dictate into my phone. So when I come back, I've got I just say the day's date and where I am and what I'm thinking. Because one of the things I have learned is if I write it down, I can't actually interpret my scribble by the time I get back into the house. I no idea what I'd written. So
Liz, I've just had an episphany moment. You'll be so pleased.
And I mean, your plot is quite big, Liz.
Oh, it is, yes. So I'm working 4.5 acres at the moment, and I effectively do that on my own. And I have,
that's a lot for one person.
It is a lot for one person. So I have my husband is not a gardener, so he loves the garden. He loves to be out and to have a look around. He loves the results of what I'm doing, and he will then help me carry things that I physically can't. I just can't carry. One person can't carry, so he'll do that. He will. If I say, could you, wheel up some bags of compost, he'll do that sort of thing. And then for about 9 months a year, I have someone who comes on a Friday and helps for 4 or 5 hours each Friday, doing maintenance jobs. So kind of grass cutting, hedge cutting, moving stuff. He's also an absolute whiz at, can you help me make these raised beds? And I always say, well, so we did this, and then I have to qualify it by saying, well, actually, Dave did this. So I know I'm not precious about saying someone else has done it. I think credit where it's due. So Dave does quite a lot of the kind of construction stuff, and as I said, and also so this week is his first week back after 3 months off. We've moved raised beds that we had previously made, and I've now decided I want them somewhere else. So that's another thing I do quite a lot, is put something somewhere and leave it for maybe a year and then go, don't want it there, move it. So we're in the middle of moving raised beds, to just the frames, to another place. So most of it I am doing on my own. The stuff that is hard physical slog or that I just can't do, I sensibly get help for.
I think sensible is the right word for your approach. And if there's anything I've learned from you, it's this sort of realism of appreciating what you can do, what you can't do, what has worked, what hasn't worked. And I think so often as gardeners, we overreach. We have an idea of something we want to create, perhaps based on visiting something like East Ruston and thinking, oh, I want my own little corner of this in my little garden, and then realizing you have neither the skill nor the sort of time, nor the, inspiration to create it. We set the bar far too high for ourselves as gardeners. And I think being a bit kinder, dealing with failure better is all.
I think that's an age thing, Thordis. I think as you get older, you just think, well, sod it, it is what it is, and come on, and I think the other thing is not to aim too high, because some things are unattainable to some people, and I think that what every person should do is garden to the best of their ability to give themselves pleasure and improve their world. It's as simple as that. Yes. It doesn't have to be high maintenance or whatever.
Yeah.
It can just be a seat and a tub and a tub of flowers and a tub of salad. You're done.
That sounds perfect. And actually, I think possibly all any of us do is that, and then we scale it up.
Yeah.
So it becomes 2, 10, several, 2 tubs, 10 tubs, an acre, or whatever. It is just what we can do. And I constantly do the overreaching thing. So I have all of last year, I was like, I'm making this 3/4 of an acre into a flower field and a prairie style garden. And I was absolutely convinced I was going to do that. And then in January, I was walking around the garden. I was doing my end of year kind of assessment, which is, I do every year, an evaluation of how the previous thing's been, what I want to do next, how am I coping, how's the garden coping, all of those things. And I just went, do you know what? I can't do that at the moment because I just don't have the energy. And so my half-hearted attempt over the last year to put a few plants in a 3/4 acre field and say, that's going to be my flower garden, it's just not working. And I just went, oh, I'm going to do that. I'm going to lift them. I'm going to put them over here in the food forest, make the food forest look spectacular, and come back to that area when I don't feel overwhelmed.
Yeah.
How clever.
Well,
That is clever.
This is like when you take on a big allotment, the amount. I'm very lucky that I've been given a 1/4 plot, because if someone had offered me a full plot, I probably would have said, yes, please. And it's overwhelming. You're right. Like, park that until you can give it the due time and attention and focus on things like the food forest, which I just love the name. For people who don't know, tell us about the food forest.
So a food forest is the idea of mimicking nature. So I'm inspired a lot by permaculture, which looks at working with nature. So a food forest is, if you think about what's in a woodland or a forest, there are loads of different layers of plants. So there's like a top canopy and a lower canopy, and then there's all those kind of shrubs, and then herbaceous plants at a lower level, and grasses. There's climbers that go up through trees, and then things that have got really big roots that go down. So if you think about your woodland or your forest, and then swap out all of those plants for edible plants, all plants that are going to support pollinators, and all of a sudden you have a forest that's kind of made up of food. And it's so simple, and it works, and it needs very little maintenance, just as a woodland needs less maintenance than an ornamental garden would say. It needs less maintenance, and as time goes on it becomes more productive, because the trees get bigger, the bushes produce more currants or more berries, and I love it. It's just such a wonderful way of working, and it doesn't need to be acres in size. It can be replicated in your back garden, whatever size garden you have.
So what would you say you're kind of, obviously you've been building on this and you have loads of different things in there, but just as an example, you mentioned some fruit, some currants and things, but what are your kind of different layers of your food forest?
So I'm for the top canopy, I'm actually not growing top canopy plants because they're going to crowd out everything else, and we're on a north facing site. So we've got a hedgerow, which I'm kind of counting as my top canopy. Then there's apple trees, pear trees, cherries, so lots of stone fruits. We are a real currant family. I really like currants, so we grow a lot of currants. There's a few gooseberries, and then herbaceous things, everything from, actually I'm going to go back one. I also grow pheasant berry, which is Leycesteria formosa, I think it is, which I just love. It's just wonderful. It's great as a windbreak. It's got lovely little berries when they actually go point of black and soft. They've got the most amazing taste to them, kind of almost a caramel taste. They're amazing. So there's lots of perennials, and I got herbs in there. There's my perennial layer. There's lots of flowers. There's then annuals like calendula, all sorts of bits and pieces. And then in terms of roots, I grow parsnips. I grow parsnips kind of as, I'm going to say as a perennial. Obviously they're not perennials, but they're biennials, so they do that wonderful root, and then they send up the most amazing flower heads, which attracts, ours have always covered in ladybird larvae. Just what's not to love about that? So we harvest half of the parsnips, the other half we leave to grow for flowers. We've got climbers like we have climbers that I like. So there are climbers like clematis, which serve nothing other than to give me a vast amount of pleasure. I grow a lot of roses, bush roses, shrubs, and climbers and ramblers. and all my roses are working plants. They get that, I get a huge amount of pleasure from them, and then I harvest the hips, and I make rose hip wine. I would say I make rose hip jelly, but it's been quite a long time since I've done that. So I do make rose hip wine.
What are your sort of leading roses for your rose hip wine then?
Oh, well, to be honest, I use absolutely any rose hips, but I've got lots and lots of Rosa rugosa because they've got those big, fat, round, really wonderfully bright hips. And all I do is I collect rose hips as soon as I see that they're kind of, ready-ish. And then I freeze them. I just bung them all in the freezer until I've got a really big bag full of them to use. So I don't kind of wait. I'm very much I'll just shove a few in my pocket as I go in. A bit like when I find an egg laid by one of the ducks or something, and you just got to remember not to walk in the house with a pocket omelette and loads of so when I come in, I empty my pockets, and inevitably there is a piece of paper, a piece of plastic that I found lying around somewhere, a bit of baling twine, a pencil that has got the lead broken in it, so but it's good for poking things. Useless pencil. And then there'll be like various seed heads or berries or something. My pockets are always like slightly dubious.
I find this, I have like a pouch that I take out when I walk the dog, and then sometimes I'll wear it if I'm at the allotment or something, and then one day I'll open the zip at the back. Oh yeah, there's a random seed head. There's a random always pockets and zips and things with random seed heads in. Always have to check before I put something in the wash to make sure I'm not about to obliterate some seed head I've collected.
Well, I tell you what, the other day after our seedy Sunday, I came home and I went straight out into the garden, and I'd taken some money with me to I mean, as a seed swap kind of thing. But if you haven't got anything to swap, you put 50p or £1 in the pot, for each packet that you have. And so I'd taken several pounds with me.
I bet you did.
I woke up the next morning and I thought, what did I do with that money? And I went to the washing machine, and thank goodness they're now polymer notes, because they were there in the pocket in the washing machine, having gone through their cycle.
They knew about you when they created the polymer notes. Also, who is unsurprised that Allah went to a seed swap where he might need money with notes rather than coins, knowing how many seeds he might want to buy? It's a lot of 50p's and £1. The food forest, I just think is such an amazing idea, and also I love, this is a bit like when we talked to Wreck a Mystery, the idea that you are using everything. Your rose hips are going into wine. I don't know how many freezers you must have, the amount of freezing you do.
Oh, well, I have a story. So in the really bad weather that we had at the tail end of last year, we had like the most amazing amount of rain, and our electric went off, and I couldn't work out. It blew. It kind of did that bang. So something's blown. And I spent most of the day walking around the house, switching things off and then switching them back on and and eventually I went, okay, so it's something out in the barn, which is where we keep the freezers. I went out.
Overload.
Lights are working. It's all right. I couldn't see. And then just as I was leaving, I saw this sort of something twinkle in the corner of my eye. And I turned around, and in the room where we have the freezers was about 5 to 6 inches of water. Had just come down the hillside and actually got through the breeze block walls and was just sitting there with my freezers in it. And do you know what? Electric freezers don't like to sit in 5, 6 inches of water. So they blew, and I went through a sort of panic of, there's a year's worth of food in there. So we ended up buying a new freezer that is now in the house. And I hate the noise of electric machinery in the house. I don't like the noise of the fridge. And now we've got this freezer that sounds like a helicopter. But it actually contains all the food from both the freezers that were in the barn. And we will eventually raise those freezers up on breeze blocks or on something, and try and see if they are completely ruined or whether they are usable, because I would rather have the noise outside than inside. So yes, there's a couple of freezers. I don't, the other obvious thing to do would be to dehydrate food and to store it that way. And I don't, because I'm of an age where I grew up with dried dinners, with, dare I even say it, with Vesta curries. Alan, do you remember the Vesta chicken chow mains? I can't do it. I cannot do dried food. It is just, I can't cope with.
Yes, I was thinking the other day about dried peas, because the ridiculous thing, I'd run out of peas, and I thought, well, why don't I get some of those dried peas we used to rehydrate? And then I thought back to them, and I thought, well, you didn't like them, did you?
That's why.
But I do sometimes wonder about. I mean, my memory goes back to Granny's pantry, which was like a jewel box. There was jams, chutneys, all sorts of pickles. Bottled fruits is what I remember probably most. Bottled pears. I love bottled pears. And they, she put a few spices in, whatever was required and everything else. And nothing was ever wasted. And I think that's where Liz's philosophy comes from, I think. By the sound of things, and I think it's absolutely amazing. I was thinking about dried tomatoes the other day. I have tomatoes every day of my life. That's what I have for breakfast. Nice. And suddenly we get this shortage of tomatoes, and people are starting to make you think when they say, "Well, why do you have to eat tomatoes at this time of the year?" I think there was one Mrs. Coffee, she called. She said, "Why don't you eat turnips instead?" But does she know what turnips are? I seem to think perhaps she does not. Anyway, I was thinking about dried tomatoes, the kinds that you get from Italy in olive oil. I was wondering if I could do that. Have you ever tried that?
I haven't dried tomatoes because I can them. I bottle them.
Do you?
Yeah. So I freeze them, but I also bottle them. So I do a lot of that. Nowadays they call it canning, but it was when we were younger, it was called bottling.
Yes, it was.
And it's, it's preserving food in a glass jar and in underwater or under pressure. So I actually do pressure canning, which gives things a shelf life of quite a long time, like 2 or 3 years, as long as you're checking the seals on them. 2 or 3 years. Water bath canning is a different thing, and it's only for specific high acid foods, but I do pressure canning, so I have got a whole load of pressure canned food. But just like the dried food, I don't much like the consistency of most of it. So I'm quite careful about what I can. So I do can tomatoes, I do can pears because they come out really nicely, and sweet corn. But carrots are just either I haven't got it right, so I haven't worked out how to do it. But they're kind of.
No, I think I know what you mean. It's like if you buy tin carrots and the consistency is gone. It's just a mush, really, isn't it?
Yeah. So and that's not for me. I like a bit of bite to my veg. So there's a lot of things I would rather either leave in the ground and harvest them fresh throughout the winter and just risk that it's going to be frozen at moments that I want them, in which case I'll just have to change what I was going to eat. Or I freeze things. So I freeze a lot of tomatoes, and I can a lot of tomatoes.
Yeah, useful tips. I think the other thing I think people have got, they probably are getting used to it a little bit more now again. But I mean, wonky fruit and veg, or shall we say, an apple with a brown spot on it, they'd put it back. They wouldn't eat it. And I remember we used to cut that bit out. You didn't waste the fruit because it got one little spot on it. Same as you get a carrot that's had a little bit of slug damage on the top. I'm not eating that. Well, the rest of it's very good.
Yeah, carrots that are slightly soft, ever so slightly bendy under your hand. There is that kind of thing of, oh, that's not nice. Well, cut the bit off the top that's not nice and the bit off the bottom. You're going to put it in a stew. It's going to go soft. Who's going to know? So I am not fanatical. I am quite picky about what fruit and veg I use, but I've grown it, and I know its flaws are just a reflection of me. And that's fine.
And your book, you've got lots of varieties in there, as we would expect from years and years of growing. And it was your really lovely runner beans that you cleverly grow, so when you've run out of potatoes, you've got that kind of texture. Which runner bean was that? Because I'm sure
that's called Greek Gigantes, and they are just like their name. They're huge. They're gigantic. And you don't grow them for the green pods that they grow in. You grow them for the white bean on the inside, for the seed on the inside. And I harvest those at the end of the year, and they're great because you don't have to harvest them through the year. It's like you can just almost do one harvest en masse, pop them all out of their pods. Hang on a second, 2 seconds. So these, can I show you?
They're the beans.
These are the Greek Gigantes beans. So you know how much beans shrink when you dry them?
Yes.
So those are them dried.
Wow. They're epic.
They are, I mean, they're massive. They're big. They're big beans. Look, they're eye size. So you can get a perspective, you know. They're massive and they're lovely. I do rave on about them, but they're so easy to grow, and I just think anything that's that simple, that is one for me. I'm not into complex stuff. And then I mostly cook them, so they are, you know, cooked most of the way through, and freeze them in small portions, just ready to throw into another meal or throw back into a pan with a bit of butter, because they taste like buttery mashed potato. They're creamy. They've got the most incredible sort of like buttery potato flavour. And you know, I don't grow enough potatoes, and I don't have the storage facilities or possibly the will to store enough potatoes to see us through the year, because I'd rather use something as an alternative. It expands the flavour repertoire in the kitchen, and I don't always need to put, you know, potato on top of shepherd's pie. It can be, you know, parsnip, it could be celeriac, or it could be creamed butter beans. You know, it could be any number of things. And I just like that it is, you know, yes, we're having shepherd's pie again, but it's not the same recipe. It's got different taste to it.
You will like this.
We've done all this talk about bottling and storing and stuff. I think off camera you've got a little bit of show and tell from your larder. I
have. So I've got, well, I mean, these are kind of some of the most basic things. So I've got a blackberry jam. So that's a foraged one from our hedgerows, because I'm not very good at taking blackberries out of hedgerows, the plants I mean, because to me it's free food. So, you know, I tolerate all the brambles. I watch them get stuck to the sheep and us and all of those things, because I do quite like free food. So, and then I've got a very simple mint jelly. So that's a crab apple and mint jelly made with windfalls given from one of our neighbours. And then this, which obviously you can see we quite like, because I've used quite a lot of it. This is labelled superb chutney, as opposed to the kind of mediocre chutney. This one's superb. So
what went into your superb chutney 2022?
So that had swede, rutabaga. It had swede, carrots. It will have had apples, sultanas, anything else I happened to find at the time. Loads and loads of mixed herbs, fresh herbs from the garden. And then I use a balsamic vinegar, because I have a gluten intolerance, so I can't use malt vinegar. So it's a balsamic vinegar and probably a brown sugar. Would be
making me hungry.
But most of I don't use recipes. Most things I'll use what's on the kitchen work surface or what I've most recently harvested.
Liz, I'm going to ask something now. Do you have, I mean, you probably save an awful lot of your own seed, but do you have a particular brand of seed merchant that you would recommend for some of these less
So there are my two favourite seed people are Real Seeds, who are based in West Wales, and Tamar Organics, who are Cornwall. I think they're I think they're in Cornwall. And both of them offer really good instructions of how to use them. Real Seeds give you masses of information about how to save your own seeds. They actively encourage you to not go back to them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But not go back for the same thing. So they give you, when their seeds arrive, with instructions of how to save their seeds. And those are my go-to places first of all. So they're
Lovely.
the first places that I will look.
And it's such an exciting time. I've been putting together seed lists. We'll come on to FLOMO in a bit, which is this sort of thing you want to grow. And that's been, there's been a lot of FLOMO because I'm not really supposed to grow that much this year because I have other things to do. But I'm still drowning in the FLOMO regardless. Alongside your jars of show and tell, I think I don't know if we've got more jars, but there was also something you'd grown. I saw it go past the camera.
Yes. So here we go. Here is, this is a spaghetti squash, this one. And I like squashes because here we are in April. Are we? March? April, I can't even think. Wherever we are. Early spring. And this is just starting to get soft. But I harvested this 6 months ago. And squashes, if cured properly, will keep for a very, very long time.
Well, a little tip on that is to leave a bit of stalk on, isn't it, Liz?
It is, and I haven't left enough on this by a long shot.
Yeah,
that's I would choose really for it to be longer than that. So,
and the other great thing is when you're using these squashes and pumpkins or whatever you've got, I mean, do save a few seeds for the next generation.
Absolutely. So I try and grow mine in very separate areas, so there's less likely to be cross-pollination.
Yeah.
So that when I open this and take the seeds out of it, the seeds are likely to just be of a spaghetti squash rather than a cross with something else. Not that there's anything wrong with the crosses, but you can't guarantee the taste of them. And sometimes they end up not a very nice taste. And then you've lovingly grown something, used all that energy, used all the nutrients out of the soil to grow something that tastes meh.
I think actually this is something you said about your fabulous big beans, your big runner beans, is that you think they've kind of got a bit too cross-pollinated now, and so you were going to go back and start again with a new packet of seed.
Yes, and that's exactly what I've done. Because I had the Greek Gigantes growing quite close to some white lady runner beans, like as in 12 feet away. So very close. And over the years they were starting to, if I was saving the seeds, they were starting to cross-pollinate. I mean, obviously with my beans, my runner beans, I don't always grow fresh. I do grow a few. I usually grow just a few new plants each year, but I leave my plants in the ground, cut them off with about 6 inches of stem left at the end of the year, mulch around them, and then I'm not going to say 9 times out of 10, maybe 3 times out of 10, they grow back. And so you've got this perennial plant that doesn't just send up one shoot, it's sending up multiple shoots. And so it's much more vigorous, it's much more healthy, and produces a much bigger crop.
Oh, so many tips. We haven't even mentioned, I loved your rooting kind of hormone liquid that you made from willow stems.
Yes, which simple.
Oh, it just seemed great. Please talk us through that. I mean, I know we've been talking for ages, but please tell us about that.
Okay, so all you need is a jam jar, an empty jam jar, with some water in it, and go out, find a willow plant, take a cutting, maybe 6 to 8 inches long, could go up to a foot long, but nearer the thin end. Chop it up into little pieces, put it into the water, shake like mad, put the lid on, and then shake like mad. And
that's a good tip, Liz.
Shake it like mad and leave it to stand. And that the the willow plants are so keen to grow. They're so good at rooting. The liquid that you end up with is chock-a-block full of hormones that will tell your cuttings to encourage your cuttings to grow roots.
And then you've just got, free homemade rooting liquid. It's just genius. I love that. I screenshot that from the PDF of your book. Must remember to do this.
Yeah, I usually remember these things like way too late.
Well, we're going back to Alan and the need to make notes, not because we are infirm. We've just got too much going on in our heads. Now, FLOMO. It's funny how, because I've got this new quarter plot allotment, I'm always flower fixated, and there has been quite a lot of veg and stuff, but I appreciate that in the end, as I come from a background of being obsessed with flowers probably, and that's how I got into gardening. So I there is going to be quite a lot of floriferousness on my quarter plot. So FLOMO is this idea of a flower or a plant which is giving you a fear of missing out. And I think only 1 year really in my life of gardening have I successfully grown zinnias, like really, really good zinnias. And it's almost always because I sow them at the wrong point. So I sow them too early or I sow them too late. And I think I get lured in by pictures and catalogues of plants that aren't as beefy as I want. So I go for the flower rather than really pay attention to the stature. So this year I am going to get a selection of Benary's Giants, and I think I'm going to go lime, salmon and white, and I'm going to try and do a section of my quarter plot which is just zinnias in those 3 colours, so that I can pick them together and make nice bunches of zinnias. And it'll probably be a disaster because we all know I've got other things to do this year. But
I mean, zinnias is a very good thing for you to do because you won't need to start sowing the seed until May.
Exactly.
By which time little one will be, shall we say, a little bit more established into a routine, I hope. And then, let us have a good summer like we did last year.
Wow.
Zinnias will love it because they come from Mexico and they just love the heat.
Well, this is the other thing. I'm trying to think about things I can grow where if we get a hot summer, the fact that I'm not necessarily going to be watering as much won't be a disaster. Obviously, that doesn't really go for a lot of the things I want to grow, but I want to put some Ipomoeas in just for beauty and for their tolerance of the heat, things like that. So I think I've got a pack of Heavenly Blue to grow as well, just so it looks, pretty and
Ipomoea.
Ipomoea. You say Ipomoea, I say Ipomoea. Mind you, what was it? A couple of episodes back with Tim Fuller, I realised I've been saying Iphion wrong. It was the Iphion, I think he said it.
Iphion, yes.
Sounds much more sophisticated.
My Iphion's arrived yesterday, by the way. From that podcast, I had to go and buy some from him.
Tag with them at East Ruston Old VIcarage now. It's back open. But yeah, that's my thing. I have always, every year, I FLOMO over other people's zinnias, and I hope that this year I can have lots of zinnia success. Do you have something similar, Liz, like a plant you really want to grow this year?
So I have equally never been able to grow zinnias. I have my Benary's giant seeds waiting to go. So last year, for the first time, I really experimented with some dwarf sunflowers. Grew a few and was I loved them, but was a bit disappointed because 2 cuts and they were gone. So the thing that I've learned is that I need to grow a lot of them. So my aim is, she says, I'm looking at the windowsill at my really rather dead bunch of flowers over there, but my aim for most of the year is to have a bunch of flowers that I've cut from the garden on the windowsill. What I have now is dried flowers. They've been there some time. So when I cut the sunflowers last year, brought them in, I mean, they just looked amazing. This got an enormous, ridiculously huge bunch of flowers. And then I went out like 2 weeks later and it was like, okay, they've kind of gone. So I think I grew about 35, which probably meant about 20 actually grew last year. And so I want to do a lot more dwarf sunflowers. And if I can grow them without something eating the seed, eating the young plants, the wind knocking them over, or slugs and snails having a slug and snail fest on them, that I will be really happy. I've just got to say, for the first time ever, I really got my act together in the autumn, and I've got a whole load of Ammi majus young plants to plant out this year. I never remember. I kind of get to May and think, oh yeah, I didn't do that, so now I haven't got them. But this year I've remembered, so I've actually got. So that's like, I think I had 3 plants last year, and I think I hit 40 this year.
Oh,
So my garden is going to be full of them. One of the things that I like to do is I like to disguise my vegetable beds so that when you look at them, you don't know that they're veg beds.
I think that's really sensible. I mean, there's an awful lot of veg foliage that is very, very ornamental. I mean, if you think about it.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. So, chard of all different colours, and Yacón I love to grow because I love the form of the plants. I'll eat Yacón and I'll make wine from it. But it's not. I love it because I love the plant more than anything else. But I grow masses of cosmos through all the veg beds. I have Campanula, which my sister calls Campanula. And I was laughing about that one day, and
but does that matter? Because you know what she means, and so would everybody else.
Well, and also I was told by a lot of people on the continent, on the European continent, that is how they say it there. So it was like, oh well, I'll be quiet. But anyway, so I grew a lot of Canterbury bell. So yes, I like to grow, quite a lot of flowers in my veg beds.
We do that here. Yeah. And it was a thing that came from my granny, who had a quintessential cottage type garden, and you grew flowers, fruit and vegetables all together. And people that come to the garden here often think that I've got some kind of secret, as to why I do that. But I do that purely and simply to gladden the heart of the gardener that has to work in there. And it's also very good for pollinators, of course, as it does help.
Yeah.
And can I ask, Alan, you always have a big raft of sunflowers in your veg garden. Do you sow those and move them to their spot, or do they get sown there and they just have to risk what might happen to them with the various marauding creatures and critters?
No, they get sown under cold glass into those little pots that dissolve in the soil, the little fibre pots. And that's how we do them. And they go out when they're substantially they're about 4 or 5 inches tall, I suppose. They go out, they give them a jolly good soaking before we plant them, and we water them in when we plant as well, just to make sure that the soil is in contact with everything. And that's it. It's simple, but I mean, there is that little step. The trouble is, if you sow with lots of sowing direct, there's always a danger that you or something else is going to pull up the seedlings, or they're going to get ruined, or even plants like the ladybird poppy, for instance. I fill a seed module tray full of fine soil, often containing molehills, you'd be glad to hear, Liz, which I gather up, and the little gentleman in the black velvet jacket is playing havoc in the garden at the moment.
Yes, yep.
And so I make my own compost, and I just scatter very thinly these ladybird poppies on the top of the soil, the surface, put them in the greenhouse underneath the staging in the shade, where it's moist and warm, and they pop up and they germinate. And everybody says poppies hate disturbance, and they do. But if you sow them in those seed modules, you take the blunt end of a pencil and poke it up the bottom of the thing, and you can pop them into a pot and off you go.
Yeah, that's the use for your you were saying your broken pencil without lead. It's for poking up the bottom of the, the seed modules.
Yes.
Now you know what to do with it.
I think this year is definitely going to be, when you live and learn and you experiment. This is my sowing in situ and seeing what I can get away with. And I fully appreciate that lots of those things are going to get pulled up, eaten, something's going to happen to them. But yes, I think it's going to be necessary to sow in situ, but at least it will be a learning curve. So I will have to report back at the end of it how much success I actually had. Alan, you've obviously got yourself a load of Ifians. How is your FLOMO faring? You've obviously managed to tick that FLOMO off the list very pronto. I'm impressed.
I got one today from Liz, and that's Greek Gigantes, the huge bean. I want to find that somewhere, and that's why I asked about seed catalogues. Really, I mean, it wasn't to share with everybody else.
Okay, so if you find those at Real Seeds, and they have got the most spectacular creamy white flowers. So rather than the orange flower that you would normally expect with a runner bean, they're creamy white and they're just beautiful.
But then runner beans, when they first came to this country, they were grown as ornamental crops, weren't they?
Absolutely.
So, grow them again.
So we can look forward to hopefully seeing some big, blousy, white flowered runner beans. Also, Alan's all about size, so an enormous bean is going to be right up his street. Liz, your book, The Seasoned Gardener, is out the 17th of April.
People can pre-order it now on my website. You can pre-order it on almost everywhere. And the other thing I will say, that when you buy direct from an author, you're supporting them the most, rather than buying through something like a large auction site or another online, very large corporation.
So everyone needs to go and get their hands on that, and just, I think all of these wonderful tips, all the sort of seed varieties, but mostly just like have a conversation with you, really. Sit down, read it in bed, and get all of your personality on the pages.
I tell you what I think is wonderful about it. It's like you letting people into your life, a person into your life. And I think that is absolutely lovely. And it's so comforting.
Yeah.
It's, you want to wrap it around you. It makes you feel good. It really does. And well done, Liz.
I'm so pleased. Thank you very much.
Until next time, thank you very much for joining us this week, and happy gardening, everybody.
Happy gardening, everybody.
Hello.
Oh, I can hear you.
I'm getting there.
And now I can see you.
Hello. Are you going to be recording it visually?
Yes.
Oh.
Alan, I can see your name, but I can't see you. Oh, here he comes.
Hello.
And then especially with, hello, Alan.
Hello.
In the room. That was great. I'll probably keep Alan's nose blowing in, though, if I'm allowed.
It will appear.
Don't want to lose any.
Appear eventually.
Quick, find that bean. It is a runner bean.
And it's done a runner. Where is that bean? And we live in a very damp house, and if beans hit the floor, they may well germinate. Not, I was about to say not in the cold, but it's not even cold inside because we've got the heating on, so we might find...
That might be how you find it, little sprout. Good way to test viability.